very path to happiness is dependent on the suffering of others and our desire to alleviate it. In the moment, now, in this life, and then when we actually remove all the ignorance and we can be a more accurate help in the future. Because right now, the person we help the most through our practice is ourselves. And that's not a bad thing, because that's the only way we're going to be able to help others.
But that can only take you so far.
Well, it's sort of, the good news is, if you finally perfect your good qualities through the sufferings of others, you will want to help them, because that's a good quality. So, there's just no danger of then just saying, well, my work here is done. Good luck, guys. That's not going to happen. Because we're all in it together. We have this sense of separation because of these very gross bodies that make us, but physics lets us know all the time that this isn't how it actually is. This is just how it appears to our little eyesight, It's not like this. And we all know from things like the state of the planet that, the caring for the entire planet matters to me and everybody else. We're just not separate. We're in it together. So, anyway. So, then he goes on to, the purpose of my life is to free all sentient beings from suffering and its causes. And this is because we want to be happy. And this is the method. I am responsible for the happiness of all sentient beings. Why? Because whether my actions are helpful or harmful to them depends completely on my own mind, on whether I have compassion or not. By generating compassion immediately, I therefore benefit numberless other sentient beings. At the very least, I do not harm them. So these are just all little points. So your motivation doesn't have to be this long, but it's really helpful if you spend some time, like on some Saturday morning when you have more time, to really think about these things. And then you prostrate. So the physical action of prostrating helps purify past actions that you've done with your body that were negative. If you think about it. There always is if. It's not magic. It's not just if you do it, it just purifies. That's not how it works. You have to bring to mind, that you want to use your body for virtue. In order to, that you regret having used your body for non-virtue, that you've harmed others with your body, And most of us, that harm is mostly things like rolling your eyes and stomping off and making people feel, guilty about something, It's not, we probably didn't all spend a whole lot of time in bar fights and, But if you were a soldier, you certainly had lots of opportunity to harm others for my benefit. I didn't go to war. So but it's so you bring to mind that now you're trying to direct your life towards positive actions only. And so and you're showing respect to, the being that gave us instructions on how to do this. And so that helps purify our negative actions of bodies by using our bodies for virtue. And if we visualize ourselves, by the thousands, more, I figure I need as much purification as possible. So, then if you recite a mantra while you prostrate, you're also purifying your speech. And if you're thinking about the good qualities you're trying to cultivate that's helping your mind. So you've got body, speech, and mind all covered. And those are the three doors to either virtue or to non-virtue. And then he tells you, you can continue to process. We can do the confession of downfalls. So this is one of the daily practices we'll talk about, is purification practices. And confessions of the 35 Buddhas, or to the 35 Buddhas, is one of the purification practices that's recommended for the morning, because it wakes you up because you're doing 35 prostrations. So, and then it shows us a prayer for Shakyamuni Buddha. So this kind of covers it all. As you can see, it might take a while to do this whole thing. One thing, though, I should encourage you, or hopefully will encourage you, is in the beginning, when you do these practices, it takes a long, long time. But as you get really familiar with the practice, you know, and the words and all that kind of stuff, the effect on your heart becomes really quick. I mean, I can burst into tears in just about any of these lines, you know, and it's just because I'm so familiar of the point, you know, what the purpose of it is. And so if I, you know, having it crack open my heart doesn't take a whole lot of time. So it gets really fast. It's not like I have to sit around and wait. It's practically there, you know, before I've even, you know, manifested the words of my mind. So, but the reason why they recommend that you actually say these things out loud, if you can, if it's not going to disturb your partner, you know, or drive your kids out, you know, out of their minds, because that helps with your speech. So you want to have your mind active, your speech, and your body. And your body can just be sitting in you know, appropriate posture. You don't have to be prostrated, although it encourages that, definitely. So you know, and as you get, like, this visualization goes on for like 3 pages, but that becomes, it's just a visualization of the Shakyamuni Buddha, and that becomes really familiar, and it doesn't take a lot of time. The effort then becomes not to just go through the motions without any of the mind really present. You know? So there's always something you have to do. But you know, it's like you do parts of this to get familiar with it, and then occasionally, when you just happen to have a block of time you have free, that, you know, then you might do the whole practice, just experience that, you know, and then, but that in general, this whole thing would not be your daily practice until you're really familiar with it. It doesn't take you, you know, 2 hours to do, because you also need to meditate somewhere. I mean, this is all the preliminaries, which is really kind of shocking, isn't it? So I encourage you, you know, by the end of this class, to, you know, get familiar with this text. We will be using this as a practice text in the weeks to come. You can also buy the booklet, or if you've already owned a prayer book, it's in there, you know, that kind of thing. And you can also download it for something like $2.99 from the website, all of which will be in your email, the links to these places. So, I've done all the talking. So what you thinking?
Can you
Yes.
repeat the 3 poisons, please?
Attachment, anger or hatred, it's usually just anger, and ignorance. And ignorance is about how things actually exist.
How, what?
how things exist. Sort of like, the difference between how we see the world and how a physicist sees the world. A little bit more. So, but it's that kind of, instead of falling for the appearances of how we see the world as if that's the only way it is, it's understanding that that's not, in fact, how it is, that that's a reflection of our perception, of our views, our mental attitudes, what we bring to the situation. So, and then anger and attachment are the two ends of a spectrum that generally are negative states of mind, are driven by. We're either driven by attachment, that we want something and we want it to be permanent, we want to own it, and and that's our attachment. So we're attracted to something and then we have to have it, and so it just kicks off all its craving, and then we do all sorts of things to get it, whether or not it's ethical or not, or the opposite, where we have aversion to something and we just do everything we can to avoid it or possibly destroy it. So those two things tend to drive most of the things we do. And so, when you look at the extreme, it can seem like really far-fetched. But if you look at your mind and see what you're thinking about all day long, you'll pretty much find that you're either thinking about something that pissed you off or made you impatient, or you're thinking about what do you want next? What do you want for lunch? What do you want to drink? What do you want, what do you want to happen this weekend? We just constantly are seeking some sort of physical sensation that we like, and we want to avoid those that we don't like. And that's all we think about. And so the Buddha just said, that's not going to get you anywhere. Because all it does is keep you in a state of craving. You're either craving to be separated from something, or you're craving to be close to something. And we'll never be happy as long as we're under the control of craving. We are addicts. It's that simple. And we're addicted to physical sensation, when actually happiness is an inner mental state. And the physical will never get us there. So we're just mistaken about what's going to make our lives satisfying. So that's why we need to retrain our mind out of this habit of craving. To put it simply. Yes?
I'm new here, but how do you do that?
Yeah, well, this is... Yeah, it's a process. One of the big pieces of the process is just starting to observe your thinking, which is part of the purpose of meditation, is to learn how to sit quietly and look at what's going on in the mind, and then to reflect on the skillfulness of the way we think, or the lack of skillfulness. And then to think about, okay, if I abandon this method and replaced it with its opposite, what would be the advantages to me of doing that? And how would I do that? So it's a lot about observing what's going on now, learning how to settle down enough to even look at the mind, even to be able to kind of keep up with it, because it's all over the place all the time. And then evaluating whether it's working for us or not. And starting to look, and the teachings help us with this, because there's a lot of teachings on why, what are the disadvantages of anger, what's the disadvantages of attachment. And this is, and then there are all these good qualities we also have. Like we have love and compassion and kindness and generosity and, and how can we expand those? So love is a state of mind that is free of attachment. It's sort of like what we think about when good parents are being good parents with their children, and they're allowing their children, to be without their own agenda going on, you know? So it's like you can love your children, you know, it's sort of like, for me, the easiest way to think of it is like with your partner, you know, you want your partner to be happy, you know, from the bottom of your heart, as long as it's with you. You know, if they're going to be happy with someone else, then you know, suddenly that love just goes out the window, and you can actually hate them. You know, so that's attachment. Love is the wish for others to be happy, but we mess it all up with attachment. We want them to be happy in a particular way that serves us. So, you know, and that actually isn't a good way to be happy ourselves, you know. So it's a whole process of looking and evaluating, trying something else out, reflecting on that. Oh, how's that going, you know? So you experiment, and then you try to get new habits to replace the ones that don't work. I mean, they seem to work. We're really good at them, but they end up with us suffering again and again and again because they fail us. And it's like, you know, there's simple things in the extremes where you see someone talk about how, you know, they really wanted revenge, but then when they had revenge, it didn't actually bring them anything. It's not like they felt better. You know, it's that we need to learn that. We need to learn that our habit of, you know, wanting to get even with, you know, for things that, for perceived harm, actually isn't a method for happiness. And then getting what we want also just increases our craving and doesn't actually work out. It's not a good way to have happiness. It just deepens our craving. Yeah.
I'm sorry again if this is like sort of everybody's experts in this, but how would you or Buddhism sort of define happiness?
Well, an easy way to define it is not suffering. So there are no worries, no fears, no craving, no sense of not having enough.
Contentment.
Yeah, I mean, some people would call it contentment. Happiness is just the way it's translated. But it is an inner state of peace without any suffering involved in it. And when you think of our negative states of mind, like attachment or anger, that's not a peaceful state of mind. Yeah.
Could happiness be defined as lack of unhappiness?
Well, probably. I've never seen a definition for happiness. You know, just, I mean, because they have lots of definitions in Buddhism, but I think it's this, you know, when they talk about nirvana, it's a state of peace. It's a state free from suffering. You know? And so nirvana is sort of the, you know, Sanskrit phrase for happiness. But it's not, but what does that mean? They describe the enlightened mind as being a blissful mind. And the way I look at that is if I try to imagine what it'd be like to have no suffering at all, you know, to not have any physical suffering, not to have any mental suffering, any worries, fears, want, you know, any feeling that I don't have what I need. If none of that existed, I think that'd feel pretty good. You know, it doesn't, you know, because some people are afraid it'd be boring, but I actually suspect it's not boring at all. You know, to just have none of those, that angst, you know, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But yeah, it's you know, just that state of just existing without any pain or fear or worry or however you look at it, or need. grasping. It really is painful. So, that'll just have to do for introduction to Buddhism. In January, we sort of start again with it's actually going to be our last course for this 2-year period and the first course for the next 2-year period called Presenting the Path, and it's an overview of the whole thing. So it'll be a good way to review the whole path for those of you who've been around, and then it will be a good beginning also. And then Sundays, of course, are good for just how do we work with our minds, because that's pretty much what we talk about on Sundays, is how to work with the mind. So in meditation, in the Tibetan tradition, includes 2 types. Pop quiz. Analytical. Single pointed. Those are the 2 types. So a lot in the West, we're exposed to meditation that's really about single pointed concentration, basically to just settle the mind from distraction. But in Buddhism, there's also the practice of actually reflecting on the teachings. So it's not just enough to have a quiet mind, because you can be quiet for many minutes of the day, but then if someone, the cat comes in and jumps on your head, you can still want to strangle the cat, because that's not working on your mind. It's just that you've got a few moments of peace. So what meditation, the purpose of meditation is learn how to be peaceful no matter what's happening. That's the idea, is how can we maintain our peace of mind no matter whether, our world seems to be, exploding around us, but it doesn't affect our peace of mind. Because we can't control what's happening around us. And that's all explained through karma. That's also a course. So we cover all these topics. Anyway. On page 181, the Greater Path to Enlightenment. This is an example of a short text that covers the whole path. And so it's recommended that part of a daily practice includes a short glance meditation on the entire path to enlightenment. And so this is an example of that. So the first paragraph, the first verse is about the teacher. And these are just in order of the way they, once you, decide, oh, this is my path, this is just the order of how we rely on the path. So you find a teacher. Then you think about the impermanence of your life. So you want to look at that you have this precious freedom of this rebirth. You have a good condition now. But then in the next verse says, life is as impermanent as a water bubble. So this is, we have to remember that it will end. And not just in the sense, like I was reading today about one of the Tibetan monks that was in Tibet, at the time of the Chinese invasion. Anyway, but so there he is. He's this revered Ripa Rinpoche, this revered teacher. Going on, has lots of students. Has all the resources he needs. Blah blah blah. And the next day he's in prison. And that's our lives. Our lives can change like that. So we don't know when our good conditions will end. So. Then the next verse is about understanding that what happens to us is a result of our past actions. It is, so we want to start taking charge of our futures. That means we need to watch what we do with our body, speech, and mind. But we have to really become convinced of this, that our actions matter. And it talks about how samsaric pleasures is the door to all suffering. This is that craving. What we consider happiness, the Buddha would say, is just the suffering of change. You know, we're hot, so we turn on the AC, and we're relieved from that heat, and that we call happiness. And then we get cold, so we turn off the AC. And then we're relieved from feeling too cold. But we see that as happiness. So the relief from a painful state is pretty much what we see as happiness. We're hungry, so we find food. So this is what feeds our craving. Oh, this moment's not so good, let's change it. Let's do something else. Then we have to look at our minds. By understanding that what we've been doing isn't skillful, then we need to look at our minds and start developing what will be skillful. So mindfulness, alertness, caution, you know, helps us get where we actually want to go. And then it wants us to encourage us to think about others. So just like we've fallen into the sea of samsara, which is just cyclic existence, rebirth in this, you know, wonderful system of birth, death, aging, sickness, all that lovely stuff. That we want, that everybody else has too. We want to help them too. But we have to understand that in order to do that, we have to create the cause. And so we need a succession of good rebirths. So we need to act in an ethical way, motivated by bodhicitta. You know, work through that. And then we pacify our craving. So we're no longer attracted to wrong objects that aren't going to get us anywhere. And this is what's so funny, is that, you know, what are the correct objects? Well, one of the things we want to really be attracted to are how we can be of help to a suffering sentient being. So instead of seeing a suffering sentient being as a problem, or somebody who's going to want something from us, we're delighted that they want something from us. But we'll need to develop perfect concentration to do this, to be able to do this 24/7. And so that's the calm abiding and special insight. So this, you know, this is just a short version of the entire path. So it's recommended that you get really familiar with the whole path, but then you just focus in your meditation, you focus on one point, one little sliver. And you do that until you have some confidence that you understand it. And then you move on to the next sliver. Or if something happens in your life and you kind of like it, oops, sorry, I need to work on this, this part now, you do that. But we always want to remember how it fits in the big picture, so that we don't just, you know, because what we often do is we go from crisis to crisis. So in between those crises, there's a kind of a lull, right? And then we don't do anything. Oh, things are okay. And then the crisis comes, but we haven't been practicing. So we don't handle it well. And then we think, oh, this path's not helping me. Well, no, because you're not practicing. So, yeah, you know, we need to practice every day, whether it's a good day or a lousy day. It's just, you know, whether we're in crisis or not in crisis. Because we're trying to develop new habits. And we'll just fall into our old habits if we don't practice consistently. Because we won't actually develop a new habit. We'll just have a brief, you know, hiccup. And that's not enough. then it goes into a practice with Shakyamuni Buddha, where you're picturing, visualizing an enlightened being and receiving the good qualities, all the goodness from them. And that's another way to sustain us with this dropping of ordinary appearance and becoming, more confident that there are enlightened beings out there willing to help us. We can't see them, or we won't recognize them, but they're there. And they can help us, and they're willing to help us. So now where are we? Pop quiz.
Dedication.
Then we have to dedicate. So what are you dedicating?
The merit we've generated.
And what does that mean?
We've spent time reflecting on the teachings, and we've made the effort to come here, so it's positive potential that we want to dedicate to our own enlightenment and that of others.
So our efforts, whatever we're doing, if they're positive efforts directed towards, helping others or working on our minds so we care about others, wherever we start, the Buddha says those kinds of activities place positive imprints on our mind stream and positive potential. So the imprints help us do it again. And, it's starting that, development of a new habit. And then it has the efforts that we've done also place a potential on our mind stream that will result in the future in some positive way. This is how things happen to us according to the teachings. All the negative things that happen to us is the ripening of some negative potential we placed in our mind stream from some negative action we've done. And all the positive things that happen to us are the ripening of some positive potential from our mind stream. So when we do that, we spend some time doing some positive activity, we want to dedicate that positive potential to be a benefit to others. And this is just a practice of generosity. It protects the potential from being destroyed by anger. Because it's actually being dedicated to a different purpose. Now we've given away to others. So it's no longer ours to destroy. So that's what we do now. So you take a moment to think about what's your motivation for coming, and your intention that you set at the beginning, and then you rejoice about the fact that you stuck it out. You thought about what was said, hopefully you generated questions. And that these activities, that's placed positive potentials in your mind, so you're happy about that. And if you rejoice about doing that, that's more merit. And if you rejoice about the fact you weren't alone doing it, you get some of everybody else's merit. I mean, they get theirs too. You don't take it from anybody, it just creates more merit. Why is that? I love pop quizzes. Why does rejoicing create more merit? What's positive about that?
You're experiencing happiness for the happiness of others.
Yes. You're not jealous. Oh, someone's a better practitioner than I am, You're just happy that they are doing positive things. That in itself is a positive thing. It's the lazy person's way to earn merit. It's rejoicing in all the That's what Lama Yeshe would say. So, hey, I'll take it. So, anyway. So if you're interested in the readings for this class, I need your email address, so someone took a list. Is it? So write legibly your email address. And I'll send out the readings. All the meditations for this class are long. So they really will be good for reading purposes, because they're really long. I mean, you're not, you know, on the practice day you'll get to see them, but they're really long. So, but the point is to get familiar with them. So reading them is helpful. But I'll also send some samples of what a daily practice might look like, and that's your homework, to try to come up with a daily practice that you can live with. And then you get to complain about it on the next class. Well, I'm sorry, but you know, I can't do this. And then we'll come up with solutions. So it's your opportunity to try it out and then complain. You know, it's always good. So, but you're complaining because you really want to be able to do it, and this is not working. So, have to have a good motivation. Anyway. So there's some different suggestions. If you're a beginner, but you still want to give it a go, really scale it down. You know, like just setting a motivation, sitting quietly with your breath for 5 minutes. Let me know if you need some basic meditations of that sort. And I can send those to you. But so don't get overwhelmed. Make it fit your, not entirely, you know, you have to make some sacrifice.